Zara Blackwell Monroe had learned a long time ago that the world would never simply hand her anything, not the corner office, not the boardroom seat, not the respect she had bled, sweated, and sacrificed her 30s to earn. Every single thing that carried her name, every building, every contract, every quarterly report that made Wall Street analysts sit up straighter in their leather chairs she had built with her own two hands, her own relentless mind, and a will that her grandmother had once described as the kind of stubborn that only God himself could have put in a person. At 42 years old, Zara Blackwell Monroe was the CEO and founder of Monroe Elevation Group, a real estate development and urban revitalization company valued at $4.3 billion. She appeared on magazine covers. She gave commencement speeches at HBCUs that left entire graduating classes in tears. She sat on the boards of 3 nonprofits, 1 hospital, and a financial literacy foundation she had personally funded with $12 million of her own money. She was powerful. She was accomplished. She was, by every measurable standard the world had invented, successful beyond the wildest dreams of the little girl who had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Southwest Atlanta. Watching her mother stretch groceries across 2 weeks and pray over every bill, she was also, on this particular Tuesday evening in late October, completely and utterly exhausted. Not the kind of exhausted that a good night's sleep could fix. This was a different kind of tired, the bone deep, soul-level weariness that comes from carrying too much for too long without ever once setting it down. The kind of tired that shows up in the quiet moments, when the meetings are over and the lights are low and there is no one left to perform strength for. Her driver, Marcus, had pulled the black SUV up to the valet stand at Harlow's, Atlanta's most celebrated fine dining establishment, at precisely 7:43 in the evening. Zara had a standing reservation on the first and third Tuesday of every month, a small ritual of solitude she allowed herself in an otherwise relentlessly scheduled life. No phones, no business. No entourage of assistants and advisors and people who needed things from her. Just Zara, a good steak, a single glass of Bordeaux. And 2 hours of peace. She stepped out of the car in a silk blazer the color of midnight, tailored to every curve of her body with the kind of precision that only comes from a dressmaker who understands that clothing is architecture. Her natural hair was pulled back into a sleek, low bun, and the only jewelry she wore was a simple gold signet ring on her right hand, her grandmother's ring, the one she never removed, and a pair of diamond studs that caught the light when she turned her head. The maître d', a tall French man named Philippe, greeted her with the practiced warmth of someone who has been trained to make powerful people feel seen. "Ms. Monroe," he said, lifting his chin in a small, respectful nod. "Your table is ready. The kitchen has already been informed." "Thank you, Philippe," she said, and her voice was low and warm and carried the unhurried cadence of a woman who had stopped. Russian years ago, he led her through the restaurant past tables of business, dinners and anniversary celebrations, and first dates full of nervous laughter to her usual table in the back corner, half hidden behind a curtain of amber light and a small arrangement of white orchids. It was a table that offered a clear view of the room while remaining partially removed from it. A table for watching the world from a comfortable distance. Zara sat down, placed her phone face down on the table, a rule she broke for no one on Tuesday evenings, and exhaled. The restaurant hummed around her. Crystal clinked. Low music drifted from somewhere near the bar, something soft and jazz adjacent, that she couldn't quite identify but found immediately soothing. The smell of good food and warm bread moved through the air like a gentle hand on the shoulder, for the first time in what felt like weeks. Zara Blackwell Monroe allowed her shoulders to drop. She reached for the menu not because she needed it. She always ordered the same thing, but because holding it gave her hands something to do. And giving her hands something to do kept her mind from circling back to the board presentation she had given that afternoon, or the development deal in Charlotte that was stuck in city council limbo, or the profile piece in Forbes that had described her, in what the writer clearly intended as a compliment, as relentlessly formidable. She had read that phrase 3 times and then set the magazine down and stared at the wall of her office for a long moment. Relentlessly formidable, is that what she was? Is that all she was? She didn't let herself answer the question. She was good at not letting herself answer certain questions. Simone Carter had been working the evening shift at Harlow's for 2 years. 4 months and 11 days. She knew this because she was the kind of person who kept track of things. Not obsessively, she wasn't neurotic about it. Her therapist had confirmed this, but carefully, intentionally, the way a person who has been uncertain for most of their life learns to anchor themselves in specifics. Because specifics are real and real things are solid, and solid things cannot be taken from you. She was 34 years old. She had an MFA in creative writing from Georgia State that she had earned while working 3 jobs and eating far too much instant ramen. She had a manuscript too, actually sitting in a desk drawer in her apartment that she had been almost ready to query for going on 18 months. She had a cat named Toni Morrison, a studio apartment in Kirkwood with exposed brick and a window that let in the most beautiful morning light, and a laugh that her best friend Destiny described as the kind of laugh that makes strangers turn around. She was also, by most practical definitions, broke. Not desperately, not dangerously, but persistently. The kind of broke that requires strategic thinking about grocery, store trips, and careful management of which bill gets paid first and which month. The kind of broke that a person with 2 graduate degrees and a head full of beautiful ideas gets when the world has not yet figured out what to do with her. Harlow's paid well, though better than most. And the work itself, the orchestrated dance of a fine dining service, the timing and the precision and the strange intimacy of feeding strangers had found a place in her that surprised her. There was something deeply human about it, she had decided. Something almost sacred about bringing a person food. About being the person who stands between hunger and satisfaction. Between a hard day and a moment of genuine pleasure. She wrote about it sometimes in the journal she kept in her bag. Observations from the floor. The way power moved through the room when certain people walked in. The way loneliness looked on a person's face when they dined alone and didn't know how to be comfortable with themselves in public. The way couples who had been together for decades sometimes reached across the table and held hands for just a moment. Briefly, like they were reminding each other of something. On this particular Tuesday evening in late October, Simone was 30 minutes into her shift when the section rotation brought her to table 14, the corner table in the back. The one half hidden behind amber light and white orchids. She had noticed the woman before, of course. This was the 4th time Simone had worked a Tuesday when the woman in the midnight blazer had come in, and he did not fail to notice a woman like that. It wasn't just the obvious things, the way she dressed, the quiet authority she carried in the set of her jaw, the way rooms seemed to subtly reorganize themselves around her presence. It was something else. Something harder to name. A quality that Simone, as a writer, was endlessly interested in and had been quietly trying to find words for across 4 Tuesdays. She collected herself at the service station, tucked her notepad into her apron, and made her way to table 14. "Good evening," Simone said, stepping up to the table with the warm, genuine smile that she had learned was the most important tool in her professional arsenal. "Welcome back to Harlow's. Can I start you with something to drink this evening?" The woman looked up from her menu. There. Eyes met. And something that Simone would spend the next several weeks trying very hard to explain and ultimately failing to put into words with any real precision shifted in the air between them. A small, almost imperceptible thing like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm. Zara blinked. It was not a slow blink or a deliberate one. It was simply the blink of a person who has been caught slightly off guard by something they didn't expect, and who is now trying to process it with the same composed efficiency they bring to everything else. The woman standing at her table was beautiful. That was the first thing. Not beautiful in the polished, performative way of the women Zara typically encountered in her professional circles. Women who had been curated and contoured and styled to within an inch of their natural selves. This was a different kind of beautiful, warm, alive, the kind that comes from inside and lights up the face without anyone's permission. She was tall, almost as tall as Zara, who was 5'9". Her locks were pulled up loosely, a few escaping to fall at the sides of her face. She had warm brown skin and wide-set eyes that were brown and deep, and this was the thing that surprised Zara most. Unintimidated. Most people looked at Zara with some degree of performance in their gaze. Eagerness or deference or naked ambition or carefully concealed awe. This woman looked at her with none of those things. She looked at her with simple, direct attention, as though Zara were just a person sitting at a table who deserved to be seen. "Ms. Monroe," Simone said. The Bordeaux? The same one as last time? Zara had not told this woman her name. She'd not been at this table the last time Simone served her. Simone had been in a different section that night, which meant she knew Zara's name from the reservation, had looked it up, had paid attention. "You looked me up," Zara said. It wasn't an accusation. It was almost an appreciation. "I like to know who I'm serving," Simone said simply. "It helps me do my job well." There was a beat of silence. Then Zara Blackwell Monroe did something she did very rarely in public. She smiled. Not the careful, controlled, camera-ready smile she deployed at galas and press events and board meetings. A real one. Small but real. "The Bordeaux," she confirmed. "Yes, thank you." Over the next 45 minutes, Simone moved through her section with the fluid efficiency of someone who has internalized the rhythms of a busy restaurant so thoroughly that the work is almost meditative. She checked on table 11 a couple celebrating an anniversary. The woman's hand trembling slightly as she opened a small velvet box and refilled the water at table 9, a foretop of finance guys who were loud and cheerful and tipped well, which she appreciated, and managed a slight complication at table 12 involving an allergy that had been communicated to the kitchen but not quite correctly processed, which she resolved with calm. Practice grace, but even as she worked, some quiet, peripheral part of her attention remained with table 14. She noticed that the woman, Zara Monroe, she'd read the name in the reservation system and felt it settle somewhere in her memory like a stone in still water. Ate slowly, deliberately. The way people eat when they are actually tasting their food rather than fueling themselves. She noticed that she had placed her phone face down on the table and had not touched it. She noticed that she looked, sometimes, at a middle distance, not at anything in the room, but at something interior. Some thought or feeling she was moving through slowly. The way you move through heavy water. She looked, Simone thought, tired. Not physically. Something deeper. Simone knew that look. She'd worn it herself at various points in the last several years. The look of a person who is very good at being strong and is beginning to wonder what it cost. She brought the steak fillet, medium rare, with truffle butter and roasted fingerlings and a small arrangement of grilled asparagus with the careful attention she brought to every plate, but with something extra that she couldn't entirely account for. A wish, maybe, that the food would be good, that this moment of solitude would be genuinely restoring, that the woman at table 14 would leave feeling, in some small but real way, lighter than she arrived. "Is there anything else I can bring you?" Simone asked, setting the plate down. Zara looked at the plate, then up at Simone. "This looks perfect," she said. And then, in a tone that seemed to surprise even herself, "Thank you, really. Not the reflexive social thank you of a person who has been raised with good manners. Something more deliberate. Like she had decided to mean it." "You're welcome," Simone said. "Really?" She turned to go back to her section. She did not know yet that she was going to write the note. Simone Carter had a habit, occupational and personal. She could not always tell the difference of watching people, not in a creepy way, in a writer's way, in the way that a person who believes stories are the most important thing in the world learns to collect the raw materials of stories, the way other people collect stamps or vinyl records or vintage sneakers. She watched the way people held their forks, the way they looked at their phones versus the way they looked at the people across the table from them, the way they laughed and what the gap between their public laugh and their real laugh looked like when you knew how to spot it. She watched Zara Monroe for the better part of an hour. In the way you watch something you are trying to understand. Here's what she observed. The woman ate alone without the self-consciousness that most people who eat alone in fine restaurants bring to the experience, the studied interest in their phone, the performative reading of the menu, the deliberate arrangement of their face into an expression of contented solitude that says, "I chose this. I am fine, I am not lonely." Zara Monroe ate alone, the way a person who has made peace with their own company eats alone, settled, present. But there were moments, brief, unguarded, visible only if you were paying the specific kind of attention that Simone was paying when something moved across her face. A quality of distance. A looking inward that wasn't contented at all, but was rather the expression of a person sitting with something heavy. A thought or a feeling she was choosing not to look at directly. The way you don't look directly at the sun, and there was this, when the table near the window a group of 4 women, clearly close friends, laughing at something one of them had said with the unself-conscious fullness of people who are completely comfortable with each other, erupted into a moment of collective, raucous joy. Zara looked up. Just briefly. And the expression on her face in that brief, unguarded moment was not happiness. It was not envy. It was something more precise and more tender than either of those things. It was longing. Simone recognized it, because she had felt it herself. The particular longing of a person who has spent so long in the pursuit of something, success, safety, accomplishment, survival, that they have arrived at a destination that is real and hard-won and genuinely theirs, only to find themselves standing in it alone, surrounded by evidence of their own achievement, wondering when exactly it was that they forgot to build a life inside the achievement. She did not decide, consciously, to write the note. The decision happened somewhere below the level of conscious decision-making, in the place where her best writing always came from. She reached into her apron pocket for her notepad. She still took orders by hand, a habit she maintained because she believed in the physical act of writing things down, and she tore a small, clean rectangle of paper from the back. She held the pen over the paper for a moment, then she wrote. The note took Simone 3 drafts to get right. The first draft was too much. It said too many things, tried too hard to explain itself, and crossed the line between genuine and presumptuous in a way that made her wince and tear it off the pad. The second draft was too little, so careful and hedged and professional that it said nothing at all. The third draft was the one that felt true, and she wrote it quickly, the way you write the true things, before the part of your brain that protects you from risk can intervene. She folded it into a small square. She wrote nothing on the outside. Then she did something that required more courage than she had needed to summon in a long time. She picked up the dessert menu that she'd been planning to bring to the table anyway, and she walked to table 14. And she set it down alongside a small plate of complimentary petit fours from the kitchen, a gesture Harlow's extended to regulars, and she slipped the folded square of paper underneath the dessert menu before she set it down. "Can I offer you our dessert menu this evening?" she said, professionally, warmly, without anything in her face that revealed what was sitting under the menu, or what it had cost her to put it there. Zara looked up. "I shouldn't," she said with the small, slightly rueful smile of someone who has had this conversation with herself already this evening. "But thank you." "Completely up to you," Simone said. "Take your time. I'll check back in a few minutes." She walked away. She went to the service station and stood with her back to the room and breathed at the table. Zara reached for the dessert menu. The folded paper fell from beneath it onto the white tablecloth like a small surrender. She stared at it. A note. Someone had left her a note. Under the dessert menu, which meant it had been left by. She looked up, and her eyes found the tall woman with the loose locks, currently standing at the service station with her back turned, apparently studying the ceiling. Zara looked back down at the note. She was not, generally speaking, a person who tolerated surprises. Her assistant Candace knew this. Her executive team knew this. Her life, professionally and personally, was organized around the principle that surprises were simply problems that hadn't been anticipated, and that sufficient preparation could eliminate most of them. She had not survived the building of a $4 billion company by being comfortable with the unknown, but she picked up the note. She unfolded it. She read it. The note said, "No, this isn't what servers do, and I'm aware it could be a fireable offense. So I want to say up front that this comes from the part of me that is a writer, not the part of me that is your server. I've been watching you tonight the way a writer watches things, which is to say carefully and without judgment, and I want you to know that I see you. Not Zara Monroe, CEO, just you. The person sitting at this table who worked very hard today and is very tired and is doing that thing that exhausted people do, where they sit with their tiredness alone because they've forgotten, or haven't had the chance to learn that tiredness shared is tiredness halved. You don't know me. I don't know you. But the best things I've ever written came from moments when a stranger told me the truth, and so I want to return the favor. You look like someone who has spent so long being strong for everyone, else that you've forgotten what it feels like to let someone be strong for you. I could be wrong. I'm often wrong about many things, but I'm almost never wrong about people, and I have been writing this story of your face for the last hour, And this is what it says: "If I'm overstepping, please forget this note exists. Enjoy your evening and I'll be nothing but your server for the rest of it. But if something in this lands, if some part of this is true, my name is Simone." I get off at 11s. Zara read the note once. Then she read it again. Then she set it down on the tablecloth and looked at it the way you look at something that has reached inside you and touched a place you have forgotten was there. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes dark, composed. The eyes of a woman who has trained herself not to be moved by things in public were bright with something she was working very hard to manage. She looked across the restaurant to the service station. Simone had turned around. Their eyes met across the room. And Simone held the look for a moment, steady, unafraid, having accepted whatever outcome was coming, and then glanced away to attend to something at the station with practiced professionalism. Zara sat with the note for a long time. Long enough that Felipe came by to refill her water and gave her the faintest questioning look, which she deflected with a small, dismissive shake of her head that meant "I'm fine, give me space." A look she had perfected over 30 years of needing people to give her space. She thought about a lot of things in those minutes. She thought about the Forbes profile and the word formidable. She thought about her last relationship, which had ended 2 years ago when our partner, a lovely woman named Renee who was warm and patient and had tried very hard, had finally said, "Zara, I love you, but you won't let me in. You won't let anyone in. And I can't keep being in love with someone who treats vulnerability like a security threat." She thought about her grandmother, who had told her once, sitting on the porch of a house in Southwest Atlanta on a summer evening, "Baby, being strong is good. But you've got to make sure your strength is a door, not a wall. A wall keeps everything out. A door lets the right things through." She looked down at the note. At the last line, "My name is Simone. I get off at 11. Zara Blackwell Monroe," who had negotiated with city councils and banks and hostile acquisition attempts and the entire architecture of a world that had not been built with her in mind, folded the note very carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of her midnight blazer. Then she reached for her phone, breaking her Tuesday rule for the first time in 8 months, and she sent a text to Marcus. "Change of plans. I won't need you until midnight." Simone had expected one of two things. Either the woman at table 14 would leave before she returned to the table, tipping generously and without comment, the professional, graceful version of pretend this never happened, or she would still be there. And the silence between them when Simone checked in would communicate whatever it needed to communicate. She had not expected the third option. When she returned to table 14, the woman was gone. The bill had been paid. She'd been rung up at the hostess stand. It emerged, and on the table, weighted down by the salt cellar, was a fresh receipt and a tip that made Simone blink and look again to confirm she was reading it correctly. The tip was $400 on a $200 bill, and beneath the receipt, in handwriting that was clean and slanted and absolutely certain of itself, "I'll be at the bar." Simone read it twice. Then she tucked it carefully into her apron pocket and she went back to work. And she did not allow herself to think about it in any useful way for the next 2 hours and 45 minutes. Because if she thought about it, she would have fallen apart entirely and dropped someone's risotto. And she had professional standards to uphold. At 10:58 p.m. she handed off her section to the closing server, retrieved her bag from the staff room, changed out of her work shoes into the pair of clean white sneakers she kept in her locker, and stood in front of the small mirror on the back of the staff room door for a moment. She looked at herself. She had done a brave thing. She had written the truth to a stranger and signed her name to it and left it under a dessert menu and then gone back to work while the stranger read it, which was either the most courageous or the most reckless thing she had done in the last 5 years. And she genuinely could not tell the difference. She was terrified. She was also, underneath the terror, very calm. The way you get when you have already done the thing that frightened you, and now all that's left is to live in whatever it creates. She pushed open the staff room door and walked toward the bar. Harlow's bar was long and dark and beautiful. All black marble and amber lighting and the quiet, confident hum of a room designed to make people feel like they are somewhere that matters. At 10:58 on a Tuesday, it was less than half full. A few couples, a lone man in a suit nursing a scotch, a group of 3 women having a conversation that seemed both joyful and serious in equal measure, and at the far end, The last stool but one, a woman in a midnight blazer sat with her back to the room. One hand wrapped around a glass of wine that was mostly full, as though she had ordered it more for the company of the glass than the intention of drinking it. Simone walked the length of the bar. She sat down on the stool, beside Zara Monroe, not the one directly next to her, but the one after, leaving the empty stool between them. Because this felt right, because it gave both of them room. Because the best conversations happen when nobody is crowded. Zara turned her head. She looked at Simone for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "You're a brave woman." "Possibly," Simone said. "Possibly just reckless. I haven't fully ruled out the second option." The corner of Zara's mouth moved. "I've been thinking about that note for almost 3 hours. Good thinking or bad thinking?" "I'm not sure there's a meaningful difference," Zara said. "I'm a person who thinks about everything for a long time before deciding how to feel about it. I'm a person who feels about everything immediately and then has to work backwards to understand it." Simone said. Zara looked at her. "That sounds exhausting." "It's mostly wonderful," Simone said. "Occasionally catastrophic. The two states are sometimes indistinguishable in the moment." There was a beat. Then Zara said, "You were right. About what you wrote." Simone held the sentence for a moment, the way you hold something fragile. "I know," she said gently. "I'm sorry." Zara frowned slightly, not in anger but in the reflex of a woman who does not expect to be apologized to. "Why are you sorry?" "Because being seen can feel like being trespassed upon," Simone said. "And I trespassed without permission. And I'm sorry for that part. Not for what I wrote what was true, but for doing it without asking first." Zara was quiet for a long moment. The bar moved around them in its slow amber way. Somewhere a glass was set down on marble with a clean, bright sound. "My last partner told me I treat vulnerability like a security threat," Zara said. It came out almost without preamble, as though she'd been carrying the sentence in her mouth for a while and it had simply fallen out. She seemed almost surprised by it. "Does she have a point?" "She had every point," Zara said. "She had all of them." A pause. "She left 2 years ago. I'm sorry," Simone said. "Don't be." "She was right to leave." "I wasn't." She stopped, recalibrated. "I was very good at being a partner in the ways I could control. The showing up, the providing, the solving. All the things I was already good at outside the relationship, I brought into it like tools. And the things I couldn't control, the softness, the openness, She stopped again. The word she was looking for seemed to cost something to say. The need. Those things I locked in a room and didn't tell her where the key was." Simone was quiet. She knew the difference between a silence that needed to be filled and one that needed to be held. This was a holding silence. "You're not going to tell me it gets easier," Zara observed, looking at her sideways. "I'm not, no," Simone agreed. "Good, I have enough people in my life who tell me things get easier. What I need," she paused. "What I apparently need is people who tell me the truth. I am available for that," Simone said. "It is my one reliable skill." Zara looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her the way she had not allowed herself to look at her during the service, when there was a professional distance to maintain and a performance to give. Without the performance, Simone wished she was radiant. That was the word that presented itself and would not be replaced with something more guarded. Radiant and warm and clearly in possession of a mind that moved quickly and felt things deeply and had developed a precise vocabulary for both of these activities. "What do you write?" Zara asked. "Fiction mostly. Literary fiction. I have 2 manuscripts. Unpublished. Sitting in a drawer. I've been almost ready to query for 18 months. Why almost ready?" Simone smiled, and it was a smile that contained self-awareness and affection for her own specific brand of foolishness. "Because almost ready means I don't have to find out yet whether the thing I love most about myself is as good as I believe it is." Zara looked at her steadily. "That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 6 months. That's sad," Simone said. "Yes," Zara agreed. "It is." The bartender, a young man with close-cropped hair, who had the practiced discretion of someone who has overheard 10,000 conversations more intimate than this one, appeared at Simone's elbow. "Can I get you something?" Simone looked at Zara's mostly full glass of Bordeaux. "What is that?" A 2016 Leoville Barton, Zara said. Is it good? It's extraordinary. Simone looked at the bartender. I'll have whatever she's having. They did not plan to stay until 2 in the morning. These things are never planned. They happen the way the best things happen, accumulating slowly from small moments of connection. One word leading to the next with a particular momentum of a conversation between two people who have discovered, with some surprise and a great deal of interest, that the other person is exactly the kind of person they have been trying to describe to themselves for a long time without ever finding the right words. They talked about work, Simone's writing, Zara's company, with a particular freedom that comes from talking to someone who has no stake in your professional identity, who is encountering you outside the context that usually defines you. Zara talked about what it had been, like to build Monroe Elevation Group from a one-woman consultancy operating out of a shared office space in Midtown to a company with 300 employees and a reach that now stretched across 9 cities. She talked about it without the controlled narrative she usually brought to the subject, the polished version designed for profiles and speeches. She talked about the years when the money was tight and the doubt was loud, and there were mornings when she woke at 3 a.m. with the specific terror of a person who has put everything she has on a single bet and cannot yet see whether it is going to pay off. My mother thought I was going to lose everything, she said. She didn't say it directly. She never did anything directly. My mother, she was a woman who had learned that directness was dangerous and subtlety was safer, but I could feel it every time I called her. This held breath. This anticipation of disaster. When did she stop holding her breath? Simone asked. When I made my first million, Zara said dryly. She sent me a text that just said, I'm proud of you, baby. No context. No acknowledgement that she had been terrified for 4 years. Just that. Did you call her? I sat in my car in a parking garage and cried for 20 minutes, Zara said. Then I called her. Then I cried again. Simone smiled. There she is, she said softly. Zara frowned. There who is? The woman underneath the blazer, Simone said. Not cruelly. With great tenderness. She's been in there the whole time. Zara was quiet. The bar was nearly empty now. The group of 3 women was gone. The man in the suit was gone. The bartender was polishing glasses at the other end with the patient, unheard attention of someone who has nowhere else to be. You're dangerous, Zara said. It was not entirely a compliment and not entirely a complaint. It was simply an observation. I prefer perceptive, Simone said. But I'll accept dangerous as a secondary descriptor. What do you want? Zara asked. The question was direct in a way that felt new, that felt like she was practicing something she didn't usually do. From tonight. She gestured vaguely. From this. Simone considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I want to know you, she said. Not the public version. Not the Forbes cover. I want to know the woman who cried in the parking garage for 20 minutes and then pulled herself together and called her mother. That's a lot to ask, Zara said. I know, Simone said. I'm asking anyway. The silence between them was different now, warmer, more knowing. The kind of silence that contains everything that has been said and anticipates everything that will be. I haven't been on a date, Zara said carefully. In 8 months. I haven't been on one in 11, Simone returned. Why not? Because I was waiting for someone who would make me want to be brave, Simone said simply. And I hadn't met that person yet. Zara looked at her for a long time. Simone, she said. And the way she said the name, carefully, precisely, like she was testing its weight in her mouth, sent a feeling down Simone's spine that she had no elegant vocabulary for. I'm not easy. I didn't ask for easy, Simone said. I'm guarded. She searched for the word. I've been told I'm emotionally unavailable. I've been told I prioritize work over people. I've been told I am relentlessly formidable, which I only recently realized might not actually be a compliment. It's not, Simone confirmed. I know that now, Zara said. I've been thinking about it for 3 weeks. Simone laughed, that laugh Destiny had described, the one that made strangers turn around. Full and warm and entirely uncontained, and it broke something in the room in the best possible way. The tension dissolved and what was left was something lighter. Something almost easy. Zara looked at her and the look on her face was one she hadn't worn in so long that it felt almost unfamiliar from the inside. Open, unguarded. Human. She smiled. The real one, not the controlled version. Get off your bar stool, Zara said. We're going for a walk. Atlanta at 2 in the morning in late October is a specific kind of beautiful. The heat has finally relented, leaving behind an air that is cool and clean and smells of autumn in the way southern autumns do, faintly, tentatively, as though the season is still trying to convince itself to arrive. The streets of Buckhead, where Harlow sat, were mostly quiet. The last of the late-night traffic giving way to the stillness of the early morning. They walked side by side, not touching. Not yet, but close enough that their arms sometimes brushed in a way that neither of them moved to prevent, along the wide sidewalk, past the closed storefronts and lit lobbies, and the occasional late cab moving through the dark. Talk the way people talk who have already done the work of being honest with each other and are now in the easier, more expansive country on the other side of it. They talked about Atlanta. Zara had grown up here and left and come back deliberately because she believed in the city with the full conviction of someone who chose it rather than just inherited it. Simone had arrived from Memphis for grad school and stayed because Kirkwood had felt, from her first week there, like the place her writing needed to be, though she couldn't explain why precisely. Some places hold your work, Simone said, gesturing vaguely at the street. Like they have the right frequency for it. Memphis is wonderful, but it's the wrong frequency for me. Atlanta gets something in me moving that doesn't move anywhere else. What does it move? Zara asked. Simone thought about it. The stories, she said. I look at the city and I see so many stories. The intersection of money and history and race and ambition and reinvention. The way the same street can contain 100 years of transformation. The way people here are always in the middle of becoming something. She paused. Honestly, you're a story I've been thinking about writing since the first Tuesday I served you. Zara glanced at her. I'm the first. Don't flatter yourself, Simone said, with a grin. You're a character. There's a difference. Is it a flattering character? She's complicated. She's been running so fast and so long that she doesn't know what she'd do if she stopped. She's brilliant and somewhat terrifying, and underneath all of it, she's absolutely desperate to be known by someone who won't be frightened away by how much there is of her. Simone paused. Yes, I'd say she's flattering. Zara was quiet for a moment. Then, how do you do that? Do what? Say the thing. The exact right true thing. Without flinching. Practice, Simone said. And a slightly concerning disregard for self-preservation. It's a gift, Zara said quietly. Not lightly. With the weight of someone who means exactly what they say, they had reached a small pocket park, a square of grass and trees and a few benches, lit amber by the street lamps. Without discussing it, they both stopped. Zara sat down on one of the benches and Simone sat beside her. And they were both quiet for a while in the easy way of people who have discovered they are comfortable in each other's silence. Tell me something true about yourself, Zara said. Something you don't usually tell people. Simone didn't hesitate. I'm terrified that the reason my books are still in a drawer is that they're not as good as I need them to be. And I'm more terrified of knowing that for certain than I am of not knowing it. They're good, Zara said. I don't need to read them to know that. You don't know that, Simone said. Not yet. No, but I know you well enough tonight. To know that a person with a particular clarity and precision and feeling you bring to a note written on a torn piece of a server's pad does not write books that aren't worth reading. Simone was quiet. She was doing the thing people do when someone says something that matters, moving it around inside herself to see where it fits. Now your turn, she said. Tell me something true that you don't tell people. Zara looked at the amber street lamp. Its light made everything soft. Made it easier, maybe? I built this company to prove something, she said. To the world, to my family, to every person who ever suggested I was less than. And I proved it. The proof is in the numbers. A pause. And I look at the numbers sometimes and I think, is this it? Is this what I worked for? Not because I'm ungrateful. I am profoundly, specifically grateful every single day. But because I realized somewhere around the $3 billion mark, That I had been so focused on building the proof that I had never once stopped to ask what I actually wanted. And what do you want? Simone asked. Zara turned and looked at her. In the amber light, in the quiet of the almost early morning, with the whole city sleeping around them, her face was entirely open. No performance. No management. Just a woman at the edge of something true. I want, she said slowly, to be known. By someone. Completely. Without armor and without performance and without the fear that if they see all of it, all the complicated, difficult, demanding, exhausting, all of it, they'll decide it's too much. She held the gaze. I want what you put in that note. I want someone who sees me. Not Monroe Elevation Group, not the Forbes cover, me. The silence that followed was the most significant silence of the evening. Then Simone said, very quietly, I see you, Zara. And Zara, who had not cried in public in 11 years, felt her eyes fill. She blinked it back. But she let Simone see her blink it back, which was, for her, the equivalent of every wall she had ever built coming down. They texted first. This surprised both of them. A little. They were both women who valued the full presence of an actual conversation and were both somewhat suspicious of the way modern connection had been flattened into a screen. But texting in those first weeks felt right. It was low stakes enough to be brave in, and they were both still learning what they could bear to be brave about. Zara texted the way she did most things precisely. Considered sentences. No abbreviations, no excessive punctuation. When she said something, she meant it. And you could feel the weight of the meaning even through a phone. Screen. Simone texted the way she wrote, with feeling and specificity. And the occasional parenthetical observation. That made Zara laugh out loud in her office in a way that her assistant Candace would later describe as the most alarming thing I've witnessed in 9 years of employment. Their first actual date was 10 days after the note. Coffee in the morning, Zara's suggestion, because she wanted to see Simone in daylight. Wanted to see if everything she had experienced in the Amber Bar at 2 in the morning was real, and not some artifact of late hours and good wine. It was real. It was, in the flat, unforgiving clarity of a Monday morning at a small coffee shop in Kirkwood. Completely and perfectly real. Simone arrived 5 minutes early and was waiting at a table by the window with her journal open, writing something. She looked up when Zara walked in, and her face did the thing Zara had been over the last 10 days. Quietly and with some alarm, realizing she'd been looking forward to seeing. It opened. Like a window. Like a door. Like exactly what her grandmother had described. You look different in daylight, Simone said. Better or worse? Different, better, Simone said. You look more like a person and less like a force of nature. Is that what I looked like before? You walked into that restaurant like you were used to the air in a room adjusting to accommodate you, Simone said. Which, I'm assuming, it usually does. That sounds uncomfortable for other people in the room, Zara said, sitting down. Most of them didn't seem to mind, Simone said. I found it interesting. Interesting how? Interesting in the way that powerful things are interesting, Simone said. And in the way that I suspected, watching you, that there was something underneath the power that would be even more interesting. Was there? Zara said. Simone looked at her steadily. You know, there was. They had coffee that became a walk that became lunch at a Jamaican restaurant where the jerk chicken was transcendent, and Simone ate with the unself-conscious appetite of someone who takes genuine pleasure in food, which Zara watched with a delight she didn't entirely try to conceal. They talked easily, deeply, with the particular conversational fluency of two people who have already done the work of being honest and are now in the pleasure of discovery. Zara learned that Simone's father had died when she was 19, and that the grief of that had been the thing that sent her into writing, because fiction was the only place large enough to contain what she was feeling. Simone learned that Zara had spent 2 years in therapy after her company hit the $2 billion mark, because success had not solved anything she had hoped it would, and she had needed someone to help her understand what she had actually been trying to build and why. I thought I was building a company, Zara said. I was actually building an argument. A case. I deserve to be here. I'm worth something. I matter. I was making an argument to a world that had told me the opposite over and over. In every way, a world tells Black women that they are less than. Did the argument land? Simone asked. The world seems convinced, Zara said. I am periodically less so. Imposter syndrome? More than that. Less nameable than that. She looked at her coffee cup. The specific terror that if you stop moving, stop proving, stop building, they will figure out that you were never supposed to be here in the first place. Simone reached across the table and put her hand over Zara's dot. It was the first time they touched, deliberate, gentle, just a hand on a hand. In the middle of a table in a restaurant in Kirkwood on a Monday afternoon. No performance in it. Just presence. Zara looked down at their hands. Thank you, she said. And her voice was very low, and it carried everything. Their courtship was slow. And this was a deliberate choice they made together without entirely discussing it, both of them having arrived at this moment from places that had taught them the cost of going too fast, of opening too much too soon and finding yourself standing in someone else's story before you knew whether it was a story you could survive. They had dinner the following week, a real dinner. This time at a restaurant not Harlow's, a small Eritrean place in Decatur that Simone loved and that Zara had never been to. Zara arrived without her driver, which Simone noticed and appreciated. She had come herself. She had parallel parked her own car on the street like a person and walked in looking slightly more unguarded than usual. Wearing a cashmere sweater the color of cognac that made her look, Simone thought, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with authority. They ate injera and shared plates and talked about books. This was a conversation that took nearly 3 hours and showed no signs of ending, and which Zara, who read voraciously but usually alone, found to be one of the most genuinely pleasurable exchanges she could remember having with another person. Simone was generous in her literary enthusiasms. She loved fiercely and argued for the things she loved with the specific passion of someone who has decided that the stakes of literature are real and high, and worth fighting about. Zara was more precise. She had strong views and stated them clearly, but she listened. She actually listened. Simone, who had been in rooms full of accomplished people, who had perfected the art of appearing to listen while actually waiting for their turn to talk, found this remarkable. You actually listen, Simone said at some point in the third hour, with the slightly startled tone of a person naming something they hadn't expected. Of course I listen, Zara said. You're saying things worth listening to. You'd be surprised how rare that principle is in practice, Simone said. I wouldn't be, Zara said. I'm in rooms full of people who don't listen all day. I've spent 30 years being not listened to by people who thought they knew what I was going to say before I said it. I made a decision a very long time ago that I would never be one of those people. They walked to Simone's car after dinner. Simone had driven too, and stood on the sidewalk in the October night. And for a moment neither of them spoke. I had a wonderful evening, Simone said. And it was such a simple sentence. The kind of sentence that could be the opening of anything. I did too, Zara said. And then, because she was practicing the new courage, I didn't know it was going to feel like this. Like what? Easy, Zara said. The word seemed to slightly surprise her as she said it. It should be harder. I am not an easy person. You know this. I know, Simone said. But easy doesn't mean effortless. It means right. It means aligned. The effort goes in the right direction, and so it doesn't feel like effort. Zara looked at her for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed a kiss to Simone's cheek, not on the lips, not yet, saving that. Wanting it to be exactly right when it arrived, and the kiss was warm and deliberate and said everything it needed to say. Good night, Simone, she said. Good night, Zara, Simone said. They drove away in separate cars in opposite directions, and both of them independently, in the privacy of their own vehicles on their own separate routes through the city. Were smiling so hard their faces hurt. It happened 3 weeks later. On a Sunday afternoon. Simone had mentioned in passing in a text that she was trying to figure out whether the first chapter of her second manuscript was working, and that she'd been staring at it for 3 days and had reached the specific state of creative paralysis. That comes from being too close to something to see it clearly. Zara had replied after a moment, read it to me. Simone had stared at the text for a full minute. Out loud? Yes, you want me to read you my unpublished manuscript? I want to hear it in your voice. I think that's the best way to hear a writer. Which is how Simone found herself on a Sunday afternoon. Sitting on the floor of her apartment in Kirkwood, Toni Morrison, the cat, installed in her lap with great authority, reading the first chapter of when the levee holds to a woman who was sitting on her couch. Entirely still, entirely present, entirely focused, Zara listened with her elbows on her knees and her face slightly forward and her eyes on Simone throughout. Not in a way that was distracting, but in a way that was sustaining. Simone could feel the attention like a hand on the small of her back, keeping her upright. She read for 20 minutes. The first chapter was 37 pages, and she had chosen to read the first section only, stopping at a natural breakpoint. When she finished, she looked up. The expression on Zara's face was the one that Simone, over the previous weeks, had come to understand was Zara's version of deep feeling. It was still and quiet and careful, like a person holding something fragile, unwilling to jostle it. "That's extraordinary," Zara said. "Simone, that is extraordinary work." Simone set down the pages. Her hands were trembling slightly. She hadn't expected to have such a physical response to being heard, to having her work be genuinely heard by someone she stopped that sentence before it finished itself. "You're not saying that because—" "I am constitutionally incapable of saying anything I don't mean," Zara interrupted gently. "You know that." That character's voice. The way the grief and the wanting sit next to each other in her body without either one canceling the other out. That's the realest thing I've read in years. Simone was quiet. Toni Morrison shifted in her lap and began to purr. "I'm scared to send it," Simone said. What if it's everything it is?" Zara said, "What if it lands the way it should? What if the world reads it and recognizes it?" Simone blinked. "That's actually what I'm afraid of," she said slowly. "Isn't that strange?" "I'm less afraid of rejection than I am of being seen," Zara said. Simone looked at her. "I know something about that," Zara said. The air in the apartment was warm and quiet and full of afternoon light. And Toni Morrison was purring. And Simone looked at this woman sitting on her secondhand couch with a cashmere sweater and a face that was, right now, the most open and present and true she had ever seen it. She reached over and took Zara's hand, turned it over in hers. "You came a long way," she said softly. "From the woman in the restaurant." "You helped," Zara said. "You and your note." "The note was just the beginning," Simone said. "You did the rest yourself." Zara turned her hand and laced her fingers through Simone's. "It was a deliberate thing." "A choosing, Simone," she said. "Zara." And then Zara leaned forward, and she cupped Simone's face in her hands with the careful precision of someone who's been waiting for a moment and is determined to be fully present in it. And she kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, unhurried, the kind of kiss that is waited long enough to know exactly what it wants to be. Warm and certain and full of everything the previous weeks had been building toward. When they separated, they stayed close, foreheads almost touching, eyes closed. "I've been wanting to do that," Zara said quietly. "For a while." "I know," Simone said. "I've been wanting you to." They had been careful in those early weeks about the difference between their private life and the public one. Not secretive, neither of them was interested in a relationship that had to be hidden. Both of them too old and too honest for that particular strain of self-denial. But careful. Protective of something that was still new and still finding its shape. Building walls around the inside of it, not to keep each other out, but to keep the world out while they learned what this was. Zara told her assistant Candace first, because Candace had worked for her for 9 years and knew her in the specific way that people know each other when one of them is deeply in the other's professional life, and both of them are professionals about the degree to which the professional and personal intersect. Candace, who had never said anything about Zara's personal life in 9 years of quiet observation, looked at her boss over her coffee cup and said, "She's the one from Harlow's, isn't she?" Zara raised an eyebrow. "How do you know about that?" "I coordinated with Marcus about the late night," Candace said mildly. "And you've been coming in recently with a different energy." "I assumed there was someone." "Different energy," Zara repeated. "Lighter," Candace said simply. "I'm glad." Simone told Destiny, her best friend, a social worker from Memphis who had followed Simone to Atlanta 2 years ago and would describe herself accurately as Simone's entire support structure over the phone, in the kind of call that begins with, "Okay, I need to tell you something," and continues for 2 Hours and 40 minutes, Destiny, who had spent the previous 18 months cheerfully and persistently, urging Simone to put down the manuscript and pick up a human, responded with a scream of such volume and enthusiasm that Simone had to hold the phone away from her ear. Despite the billionaire CEO, Destiny said when the scream had finished. You wrote a note to a billionaire CEO. She's also just a person, Simone said. A person with $4 billion. Simone, money isn't, I'm not saying it matters, I'm saying it's wild, Destiny said. Tell me everything. Tell me everything right now and don't leave anything out. The world at large found out a little more than 2 months into their relationship, when someone with a phone and good angle photographed them at a gallery opening in Midtown. Zara had been invited to support a young, Black artist whose work she collected, and had asked Simone to come, and Simone had stood beside her in a deep green dress that made her looks look like a crown. And at some point Zara had put her hand on the small of Simone's back in the natural, unguarded way of a person who has stopped performing and is simply where they are. And someone had caught it and posted it online. The response was, loud. Monroe Elevation Group's PR team called Candace within the hour. Tell them, Zara said, when Candace briefed her, that my personal life is my personal life, and that if any outlet wants comment, they can reach out through proper channels and will receive the single sentence. Ms. Monroe is a private person who declines to comment, and if they speculate, Candace said, they will speculate regardless of what we say, Zara said. Let them. Simone, who had not been in the orbit of celebrity coverage before and found the experience slightly surreal, texted Zara a screenshot of a gossip headline with the message, I feel like I should warn you. I am considerably less glamorous than they're going to make me sound. Zara replied, you are exactly glamorous enough. Stop reading those then, are you okay? And Simone, sitting in her apartment with Toni Morrison and her manuscript in the quiet Kirkwood morning light, felt something settle in her chest. The specific, warm anchoring weight of being checked on by someone who means it. I'm good, she typed back. I really am, they had them of course. This is a love story, not a fairy tale, and love stories, real ones, have the hard parts. The places where two people's wounds and habits and old fears bump into each other in the dark. Zara's hard part was the withdrawal. When work became overwhelming, which it did frequently, the scale of her company demanding a scale of focus that could consume entire weeks, she went inward. Not deliberately, not cruelly, but the walls went up, the responses became shorter and more functional, and the warmth that had been so carefully opened in her retreated to some interior room that she didn't always know how to find the door back to. The first time it happened, Simone waited 3 days and then texted, I can feel you pulling back. I'm not going anywhere. But I want you to know I feel it. Zara read the text in a cab on the way to a late meeting and stared at it for a long moment. I'm sorry, she typed back. I do this, I'm working on it. I know, Simone replied. I'm not asking you to fix it overnight. I'm just asking you to tell me when it's happening. So I know it's the walls and not me. That was the thing. Zara understood later that Simone gave her that no one else had managed to give her. Not a demand to be different. Not an ultimatum. Just a simple request for communication, tell me so I know. It's the walls and not me that removed the defensiveness from the situation entirely and left only the truth of what was happening. She called Simone that night from her home office at 11 p.m. and said, I want to explain what happens to me when it gets bad. Can we talk? Yes, Simone said immediately. Yes, I'm here. And Zara sat in her home office and explained, with the laborious precision of someone translating a language they have spoken internally for years but never said aloud, how the pressure of managing the company and the board, and the public expectations, and the weight of being the singular visible Black woman in her specific echelon of the business world sometimes converged into a state that wasn't quite depression and wasn't quite anxiety and was mostly just a kind of overloaded withdrawal, like a circuit breaker that trips when too much current runs through it. Simone listened, without interruption. Then she said, that makes complete sense. Thank you for explaining it. You're not. Zara searched for what she had been expecting. You're not frustrated? Of course I'm not frustrated, Simone said. I'm grateful. You just gave me information I needed. That's the opposite of frustrating. Zara was quiet for a moment. You're very good at this, she said softly. At what? At making it feel safe to tell the truth. Simone was quiet for her own moment. Then, I learned from you. You were the first person I told about the manuscripts. Really told. About what I was actually afraid of. And you didn't flinch. You just held it and reflected it back, and that was everything. A pause. I just try to do the same for you. The reciprocity of that. The completeness of it. Two people, each carrying their specific fears. Each having discovered in the other a place where the fear could be set down. Simone's hard part was different. It was the money, not the money itself. Simone was not a person who confused someone's financial resources with their character. And Zara was not the kind of wealthy person who used money as power in personal relationships. But the imbalance of it created in Simone an occasional anxious recalibration. Who she was. What she brought. Whether the deep things she had to offer, the seeing, the honesty, the writing, the warmth were really sufficient exchange for what she was receiving. You're doing the accounting again, Zara said one evening. Catching the expression on Simone's face over dinner at Zara's townhouse in Midtown, which was beautiful in an understated, curated way that made Simone slightly breathless every time she came here. Simone looked up. Is it that obvious? To me, Zara said, you get a particular look. Like you're running a balance sheet in your head and you're not sure the numbers add up. Simone set down her fork. I don't want to be the thing you do because you're finally letting yourself have nice things, she said. The sentence had been forming in her for 2 weeks and she was glad to have it out. Zara looked at her very steadily. You are not a nice thing, she said. You are not a thing of any kind. You are a person who looked at me across a restaurant and saw something true and wrote it down and left it under a dessert menu. And who has been consistently and without performance the most honest and grounding presence I have encountered in my adult life. A beat. I am not with you because you are a nice thing. I am with you because you make me remember who I actually am. That is not replaceable by money or status or anything the world has spent 30 years suggesting I should want. Simone was quiet. Okay, she said finally. Okay. Zara confirmed. But I just want to say for the record, and not because I'm still running the balance sheet, because I'm not, that the thing you just said to me was the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. Zara's expression, which had been serious and deliberate, relaxed into the real smile. Good, she said. Now eat your food. Marcus went to considerable trouble to find the specific saffron from a very earnest Ethiopian grocer in Decatur, and I will not have it go cold. On a Friday afternoon in February. 5 months after the note, Simone sent her manuscript. She had been building up to it for weeks. Revising not because it needed more revision. Zara had read it twice now and had said, with considerable precision, exactly why it was ready and exactly what the word ready meant in this context. Which was not perfect, nothing was perfect, but true and complete and ready. To meet the world, but because sending it required a kind of courage that did not come as naturally to her as the courage it took to write. Query letter was 23 drafts over 6 weeks. Zara had offered once to connect her with people in her network. She knew several prominent figures in publishing, as she knew several prominent figures in nearly every industry, and Simone had thanked her genuinely and declined, which Zara had understood and respected without requiring an explanation. I need this to happen on my own terms, Simone had said. I need to know that when it happens, it's mine. It will be yours regardless, Zara said. But I understand. And I'm proud of you for knowing what you need. She hit send at 3:47 in the afternoon. Sitting at her kitchen table with Toni Morrison on the windowsill and the Kirkwood light coming in at the angle she loved. And immediately texted Zara, I did it. 3 seconds later, Zara was in a board meeting and had her phone on silent. But she checked it, which Candace would later note was unprecedented. Came the reply, I know you did. I'm so proud of you. How do you feel? Simone thought about it. Terrified, she wrote. And like, I just jumped off something very high and I'm still in the air and I don't know yet if I'm flying or falling, Zara replied. That's what it feels like when you're flying. The falling has a different quality. Trust me on this. I've done both. That evening, Zara left her meeting early, another first. Candace's personal tally of precedents broken in the months since a waitress at Harlow's had left a note under it. Dessert menu was becoming considerable and drove to Kirkwood and knocked on the door. Simone opened it in paint-stained sweatpants and her MFA program hoodie, her looks loose around her face. Holding Toni Morrison like a very large and disgruntled stuffed animal, Zara stepped inside and put her arms around both of them. It was the first time she had held Simone in this particular way, fully. Without restraint, without the managed quality that physical affection sometimes still carried in her. Just holding. Just present. You did the brave thing, she murmured into Simone's hair. Simone leaned into it. We both did, she said. Spring came to Atlanta the way it always did, suddenly, decisively, as if the city had been holding its breath all winter and finally exhaled. The dogwoods went white and the air turned warm and the evenings stretched themselves out like something languid and pleased with its own existence. And Simone walked through Kirkwood in the early mornings with her coffee and her journal and the specific, full-body happiness of a person whose life has changed in ways she is still, daily, understanding. She had 2 full manuscript requests within 6 weeks of querying. She had a phone call with an agent who described when the levy holds as the kind of debut that announces a major voice. And Simone had had to step outside after the call and stand on the sidewalk and look at the sky for a while because she didn't know what else to do with the feeling. She called Zara immediately. Zara was in a meeting. She was always in a meeting, but she stepped out for Simone. She stepped out for Simone in a way that she did not step out from members of her board or city officials or journalists from major publications. Candace observed this without comment as she observed most things and filed it in the mental category she labeled evidence that my boss is actually happy. Tell me everything, Zara said. Her voice in private had become something new in the months Simone had known her, lower, less armored. A voice that had finally come home to itself. Simone told her everything. Zara listened. And then she said, with the particular simplicity of someone who doesn't need to decorate the true things, I knew. From the first paragraph. I knew. You're going to be absolutely insufferable about having been right, Simone said. Completely, Zara agreed. I intend to be unbearable about it for years. Years. The words sat in the call between them, warm and comfortable. An assumption neither of them had made out loud yet, but which had been building in the fabric of what they were doing. In the small domestic facts of the last months, the drawer of Zara's that had filled gradually with Simone's things. The Tuesday dinners that were now at whoever's place felt right that week. The way Toni Morrison had accepted Zara with the resigned tolerance of a cat who has decided that a new person is, on balance, acceptable, and which now had been said, and was real. Years. Simone smiled. Years, she said. 1 year after the Tuesday in October when a woman in a midnight blazer ordered a steak and a woman with loose locks tore a piece of paper from a server's notepad and wrote the truth on it. Simone and Zara sat together at Harlow's, not at table 14 that had felt too pointed. Too much like a performance of sentiment which they were both too honest for. They sat at a regular table near the window. In the full warm light of the restaurant, not hidden behind amber and orchids but present in the room the way they were always present together now, fully. Without armor, Felipe greeted them with his practiced warmth and seated them himself, which was a distinction he offered to almost no one. They ordered Bordeaux, because some things deserve to be commemorated. A year, Simone said. When the glasses arrived, a year, Zara agreed. You've changed, so have you. Simone shook her head. I've stayed the same. I've just stopped pretending to be smaller than I am. Zara looked at her across the table, across the white cloth and the crystal and the soft light, and felt the particular, specific, world-stopping quality of love. Not the beginning of it, the dizzy, not yet real quality of new love. The other kind. The known you for a year and known you completely kind. The kind that has been tested and survived and is stronger for it. I love you, she said. She had said it before, the first time had been 6 months ago. On a Sunday morning in Kirkwood when Simone was making coffee and Zara had been watching her from the couch and had simply said it, as though it had been sitting in her mouth for weeks and had finally decided it was done waiting. Simone had looked up and smiled and said, I love you too, Zara. and then handed her a cup of coffee. And that had been exactly the right way for it to happen, but she said it now because it was worth saying again. Because the best things were worth saying over and over in different contexts and different lights, until saying them became as natural as breathing. "I love you," Simone said back, without hesitation. With everything she meant, across the restaurant in the back corner, table 14 sat quietly under its arrangement of white orchids. Empty tonight, waiting as all good tables wait for whoever would need it next. For whatever would sit down and exhale and allow itself for a few hours. To be somewhere safe, a server moved through the room with grace and attention, carrying plates, watching the world. Noticing the things that deserved to be noticed. A note on note, Simone kept the receipt. Not Zara's note, that one she had memorized. Anyway, and knew as well as her own handwriting. She kept the receipt from the evening, which Zara had left on the table alongside her $400 tip and the 2 words. "I'll be at the bar." She kept it in the front of the journal she'd been carrying in her apron pocket on the night they met. The journal that now lived on her desk alongside the final signed contract with a literary agency, a real one, the one she had been working toward for years, and a photograph from a Sunday morning in Kirkwood. Zara and Simone's kitchen in a robe that was slightly too small for her because it was Simone's. Making breakfast with the focused, competent attention she brought to everything. And Simone sitting at the table behind her with her journal, watching her with an expression that she hadn't known was on her face when Destiny took the photo, and that Destiny had texted to her with the caption, "This is your face. Keep this face," Simone had shown Zara the receipt once, the "I'll be at the bar" receipt, on a quiet evening. When they were talking about the year that had passed and the things it had contained, Zara had held it carefully. Read the 2 words she had written in her own hand. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I was going to," Simone said. "I had to talk myself into it." "What did you say to yourself?" Simone thought about it. "I said, you wrote the note. You already did the brave thing. All you have to do now is see what it made." Zara was quiet for a moment. She set the receipt down gently on the table between them, the way you set something down when you don't want to put it far. "Thank you," she said, "for writing it." "Thank you," Simone said, "for being someone worth writing to." They sat together in the Kirkwood light, the 2 of them and the cat and the manuscripts, and the receipt with its 2-word invitation and all the years that were still coming, full of their specific, complicated, beautiful work. 2 women who had taken the risk of being seen and had found, on the other side of the risk, each other. "This is what the note made. This is what it was worth."